Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to dive into Primavera P6 and turn a simple schedule into a seriously powerful financial tool. We're going to see exactly how to load, track, and really understand your project costs, basically transforming your timeline into a financial story. Okay, so let's get right into it. A schedule? That's just the skeleton of your project. But as Hani Ismail points out here, managing the cost, that's the lifeblood. Without a crystal clear view of your cash flow, you're pretty much flying blind, and it doesn't matter how perfect your timeline looks on paper. So here's our game plan. First, we'll talk about why a cost-loaded schedule is so dang important. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, defining the language of cost before we walk through the actual process in P6. After that, I'm going to share some really practical workarounds, and we'll wrap things up by tackling a super common question about tracking your budget. So why do we even care about all this? Well, try to think of cost loading not as some boring data entry task, but more like you're taking your project's financial pulse. It's all about knowing precisely where your money is going and, maybe even more critically, when it's going there. And here is the absolute key difference. A regular schedule tells you when work is supposed to happen. A cost-loaded schedule, it tells you when the money will be spent. That one little shift changes everything. It lets you forecast your expenses, manage your budget proactively, and make smart calls before you ever run into money trouble. Now, to manage costs well, we've all got to be speaking the same language. You know, using precise terms isn't just about sounding smart. It's about preventing the kind of mix-ups and confusion that can lead to some really expensive mistakes down the line. And to make sure we're all on that same page, we're going to ground our key definitions in the industry gold standard, the guide from ACE International. This way, there's absolutely no confusion. First up, cash flow. Let's keep it simple. This is just the money moving in and out of your project over time. A positive cash flow? Awesome. A negative one means you're burning through cash faster than it's coming in. And that's something you definitely need to know about ahead of time. And that brings us right to cost loading. This is where we get our hands dirty. It's the actual process of attaching dollar values, or euros, or whatever your currency is, to all those individual tasks you've so carefully planned out in your schedule. Okay, enough with the theory. Let's actually fire up the software and see how this works in the real world. We're going to walk through the standard procedure for loading costs right into Primavera P6. Generally, you've got two main ways to go. There's the detailed method, which gives you incredible precision by tracking the cost of every single thing, every person, every machine, every bit of material. Then there's the lump sum approach, which is way simpler and faster, where you just assign one total cost to a whole task. So if you're going the detailed route, it's a pretty logical process. First, you build up your library of resources, defining your teams, materials, and all your equipment. Then you set their prices, like, say, an hourly rate for a welder. And finally, you assign those resources to the right activities and tell P6 how many hours or units you need. P6 does all the heavy lifting and crunches the numbers for you. But what if you don't have time for all that detail? Or what if you hit a common roadblock, like stakeholders who can't access your P6 reports? The real world calls for practical solutions, so let's look at some clever workarounds. Here is a brilliant little hack for lump sum loading. You create one generic resource and you set its price to exactly $1. Now check this out, the budgeted units field basically becomes your total cost field. So if an activity costs, say, $50,000, you just type 50,000 as the units. It is unbelievably fast and it works perfectly. Okay, here's a problem that project managers deal with constantly. You've done all this hard work cost loading in P6, but now your boss or your client needs a simple cash flow chart, and they don't have P6. All they have is Excel. And believe it or not, the solution is super easy. You just go right to the resource usage spreadsheet in P6, copy all that cost data that's spread out over time, and you just paste it right into Excel. With a quick little formula for the cumulative cost and a few clicks to insert a chart, you can create a professional-looking cash flow S-curve that anybody can understand. All right, now for what might be the most critical piece of project control, tracking your actual performance against the plan. And to do that right, we have got to clear up a very, very common point of confusion. I get asked this question constantly. You finished a task, it's 100% complete, so why don't the numbers for what you've earned match what you've actually spent? I mean, it feels like they should be the exact same number, but so often they're not. Let's break this down. Earned value, or EV, is all about the value of the work you've finished based on the money you plan to spend.
The single most important thing to remember here is that earned value is always tied back to your original budget.
Actual cost, though, that's just raw reality. It's the final bill for the work, the real, true expenses you paid for labor, for materials, for everything. It has nothing to do with the plan, it's all about what you actually spent. So when you see a difference, it almost always comes down to one thing: plan versus reality. Maybe the price of steel went through the roof, or maybe your labor costs were way higher than you budgeted. It could also be a data problem, like your actual costs weren't imported correctly, or you're measuring your performance against an old, outdated baseline. And finally, let's just zoom out for a second. It's so important to remember that your project data doesn't live on an island. It has to connect and sync up with the company's main accounting systems. This kind of integration makes sure that what you have in the project plan actually matches the company's official financial records, creating one single source of truth for the entire organization. So, what this all comes down to is this: by taking the time to carefully load costs, you're doing so much more than just plugging in numbers. You're giving your project a voice that tells a clear, compelling financial story from beginning to end. So think about that as you start applying these techniques. Is your schedule's story going to be one of foresight, of control, and of success? Or is it going to be a story full of surprises and chaos? The choice really starts with how you manage its costs.
Thanks for watching.